What's going on, everybody? These are the views from Lot K. I'm Max, coming to you today, again, ready to give you a full action-packed episode. We got an exciting pod, packed everything ready for you today. You probably noticed I didn't address Steve. He is not with us today. He had some other conflicts coming up. He will be joining us back again on the next episode, but show's going to go on. We got so much good stuff ready for you today. I am excited to bring it to you. It's playoff basketball. There's no other way to put it. Sixers are getting ready to start the playoffs coming forward. It's going to be the majority of this episode today, but we got a few other things to address before we get there. So let's just do a quick little recap of everything that's been happening in Philadelphia sports this week. And what better place to start off than with the Eagles? Eagles made an interesting signing this past week, signing defensive end, linebacker, whatever position he's been filling in recently, Ryan Kerrigan from the Washington football team. He has been a vet with them for the last 8 or so years. He had a solid 2021 with 17 combined tackles, 5.5 sacks, 1 fumble. Now, he only started 1 game last year. Washington's defense was insane last year. They had a lot of good rotations, a lot of good players come through. Kerrigan was a good veteran piece. He got about 40% of the reps last year for the football team out of all their defensive reps in total. But that 1 game start, time was going to tell soon enough that he was on his way out the door, and we signed an excellent veteran presence from a division rival to come in and help the defensive team room. Is this a good signing? His age is up there. You wonder how many years he's going to be able to bring it, what he's going to give to the team this year. Like I mentioned, he only had 1 game that he started all of the 2020 season, but you cannot discredit the veteran experience that he brings to the team, the depth that he provides on the defensive line and the linebacker core as a whole. I think he's going to get some more reps than he saw with Washington. Maybe he'll get 50 or so reps, or 50% of the reps. I don't know if he's going to be a full-time starter. He most likely will not be, but I still think this is a excellent signing for the Birds to make. Bring in another great player to really add to the team. Just keep adding players in there. Really take that defense up a step. Give some of those younger guys some experience, some teachings on the practice field. Let him go in game time. See what he can bring. Be someone that really speaks up, calls out some offensive schemes or changes they're seeing at the line. I think this is going to be a really good move for the Birds. Had to touch on it quickly. Let's keep it rolling. Let's look at the Phillies. They're coming off a pretty brutal road stretch where they went 4-5 over their last 9 games. But let's look back at Tuesday night's game. Zach Wheeler came out and threw a gem over the first 7 innings against the Marlins. 7 innings pitched, 5 hits, only allowed 1 earned run, and 10 strikeouts. Just another great performance from Wheeler. It seems like this is what he's really bringing to the table. But I keep repeating myself time and time again, this bullpen is horrifying. Alvarado comes in and he gives up 2 runs in 2/3 of an inning in the top of the 8th. You can't have one of your setup guys coming in and doing that, especially with an excellent pitching performance from Wheeler. We've been seeing him recently from Nola, even some from Velasquez and Eflin, every now and then from Chase Anderson, where the starters are having really good performances, but the bullpen is coming in and just blowing leads. It was 1-1 going into the 8th. Before the end of the 8th inning, when they brought in Archie Bradley, it was 3-1 Marlins, and it just looked like another game where it was done and dusted. That's it. Pack it up. Game's over. However, the offense kind of surprised us in the bottom of the 8th. They came alive to salvage this game with a 7-run explosion. A couple RBIs here and there. I know Bryce had one that really opened the gates. I think it was a 2-run RBI single that he had to extend it to either a 5-3 or 6-3 lead. But the Phillies, they come out and they scrape this win from the Marlins, trying to pick themselves back up. Like I mentioned, Archie Bradley, he came in last night for that 3rd of an inning before they turned it over to Neris in the 9th. He's back. He's healthy. He picked up the win in that game. It is so great to finally see him come back after he was out for the last few weeks. Phillies really have a chance to move up the standings here. As of the time we're recording this, they are currently a game back of the Mets from first place in the NL East, and they are 3 games ahead of the Braves and 3.5 ahead of the Marlins. So they're kind of setting themselves up in the top half of the division with the Mets to really break away from the bottom half. But we need a really strong week here from the Fightin' Phils to keep that going. They need to handle the rest of this Marlins series, trying to at least win the series, or if not, just... No, I'm going to correct myself. The Phillies need to win this series against the Marlins. They need to prove themselves against these weaker NL East teams, really fight their way up and get as many wins as they can. The NL East is going to be tough this year, and they are going to have to fight, where if they can't get the NL East, they're going to need to get that second wildcard spot. The NL West is a bloodbath once again this year. The top 3 teams all projected right now to be in the playoffs, but it's also the middle of May. Things are going to change. They need to come out and play their best baseball game in and game out. They can't accept any more of these games where the pitcher gives you a good performance and the bullpen is giving up 2 runs to blow the game. More can be said about the offense, where they need to be a little more consistent throughout the game. It's hard to complain when they score 7 runs in the bottom of the 8th to win us this game. They got the rest of this Marlins series ahead of us. And then the Red Sox come to town this weekend, who currently have the second best record in all of baseball. And this Marlins series is even more important because they're going to have to try and minimize as much bleeding as possible against the Sox this weekend. Now they're at home, so the Phillies are naturally going to play a little better. Hopefully they're able to go 2-1 against them, but to be able to get a win here, I feel like that's going to be the baseline. Go 1-2 against them, try and get a sweep of the Marlins, and stay above 500. Keep clawing at the Mets, hope that they slip up at some point, and then just keep working our way through the NL East, because it is not going to be easy this year. As I've said it before, I'm going to say it pretty much for the rest of the season. Get the wins where you can. Bullpen needs to fix themselves. There's no better way to put it. One more quick recap across all Philadelphia sports before we jump into the playoff preview. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Union briefly. Since the last podcast we did, they had a 1-1 draw against the New England Revolution, who currently sit at the top of the Eastern table, and then they came out this past weekend with a 1-0 win against the 10-man New York Red Bulls side. 4 important points to get there. It would have been nice if they could have got a win against the Revs, but they were down 1-1 going into the 85th minute until Kasper Szyboko, with a pretty much a last-minute savior to equalize the game and get a point from that. Union currently sits 6th in the Eastern table with 8 points, and they are 3 points back of the Rev, who I said before are currently leading in the Eastern table. The Union are really shaping themselves up well here. They have a lot of time to focus on their MLS opponents, not worrying about the CONCACAF Champions League. It's down the road. We got 3 months to worry about that. Got to keep focusing right here, right now, come back out and defend the supporters' shield that they are currently holding on to. They got a match coming up Sunday night against DC United. This is a solid chance to keep the unbeaten streak rolling. They're sitting above DC United in the table. This is a really good chance to get 3 points on the road at Audi Field. Hopefully get 11 points, see where that puts us come next week. It is a very exciting time for the Philadelphia Union, defending the supporters' shield this year. Just keep moving forward. All right. With all that being said, we can really get forward into it. It is the Sixers playoff preview. I am so excited for this. Going into this year, this always felt like this season where the Sixers really had a chance to prove themselves. It got really worrying with the Nets forming their super team, signing Kevin Durant. He was going to be fully back healthy this year, trading for James Harden at the start of the season. I almost changed my mind a little bit during the year, thinking, this is going to be a little concerning for the Sixers. How are they going to put up with the East now when the Nets look like they have a lot of firepower going for them? But we got to see if throughout the year the Sixers are really paving the way for a dominant playoff performance. We should start off, let's just quickly look at the Eastern Conference playoff bracket, how it shapes out right now. There is still the 8th seed playoff game to be played on Friday night, and that's going to be between the Wizards and the Pacers. The winner of that will play the Sixers. First game, it looks like it's going to be Sunday afternoon. They haven't finalized TV schedules yet, but that's what it's currently shaping out to be. Everything's going to get finalized come Saturday morning. Sixers against the Wizards or the Pacers. We'll dive into that a little more deeper. Let's look at the rest of the bracket right now. The 2-7 matchup is going to be the Nets versus the Celtics. That is going to be a great Atlantic Division battle. If Jaylen Brown was healthy for this series, it would be very exciting. But the Nets look like they're going to have a pretty easy path into the Eastern Conference semis. Celtics, while Jason Tatum did just drop 50 on the Wizards, I don't think he's going to be able to do that for 7 straight games. It's going to be a dominant Nets team with a lot of firepower, and the Celtics do not have that much to match with them. They have Kemba, they have Tatum, but really missing Brown, it's going to be hard to see what they can do. But this is still a fun matchup, even if it's 2 superstars versus 3 superstars. It is very exciting to watch this all play out. Moving on, the 3 versus the 6, which is probably going to be the most competitive matchup of the first round. It's going to be the Milwaukee Bucks, the 3 seed, against the 6 seeded Miami Heat. Jimmy Butler's seeing if he can really come out and go up against Giannis, who's able to lead the way for him. Bam Adebayo also joining the Heat, still from last year. You're going to be wondering to see if Tyler Herro could put on a similar performance of what he had in the playoffs last year. The Bucks this year, though, have the addition of Drew Holiday, and they just feel like a more complete team. This is a series where I can see it being anywhere from a 5-game series to going 7-game series, and the 7th game is decided in the final minute. It's going to be very close coming down to it. This one's still kind of a coin flip, and whoever wins this is going to give the Nets a big run for their money in the semis. I'm excited to see whoever that shapes out. Personally, I think it's going to be the Bucks in 6 for that series. You could tell me, hey, I just came back from the future. Heat won this series in 7, and I believe you. It's going to be a very competitive series all around. I'm very excited to see how it shapes out. But now let's look at the 4-5 matchup, which I think is the second most fun matchup of this because it's 2 teams we really didn't expect to see this dominant of a performance from this season. We have the 4-seeded New York Knicks against the 5th seed Atlanta Hawks, and that's just going to be a fun matchup as a whole. I'm going to save a little more of the breakdown of this series for when I'm talking about the second round opponent, because the winner of that 4-5 series will face the winner of the 1-8 matchup, which will be Sixers versus Wizards or Pacers. We'll dive into all that later. But just the current outlook of the bracket for the Sixers right now, this is probably the best draw you could have imagined. The Sixers don't have to face the Nets, the Bucks, or the Heat, which are their 3 biggest competitors, until the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't want to call it a cakewalk to the conference finals, but it kind of feels that way. We can dive more into it going through it. The Sixers are the 1 seed. They're going to be going up against the 8 seed, where you either get the Pacers that have a little momentum behind them, rattling off 2 straight wins in do-or-die matchups, or you're going up against the Wizards, who have kind of been back and forth this whole year. Still, the 1-8 seed, you're not going to see an 8 seed beat a 1 seed for a long, long time. It can still happen, but this is just not the matchup for it to happen. The Sixers team is too complete to lose to either the Wizards or the Pacers. Then it's the next round. It's going to be the winner of the Hawks versus the Knicks. And once again, both exciting teams, but they just don't match up well with Philadelphia. So all in all, it's really going to come down to how the Sixers do and if they get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But still, just on paper, this is a very favorable bracket for the Sixers. I'm really excited for how it's all going to shape out. This is a team I could see playing deep into June and into July. And I didn't even know that the NBA playoffs this year go until the middle of July. I know the season was pushed back and it was a shorter schedule as a whole, but it's going to feel weird with probably finals basketball starting right around July 4th. And how fitting to have, the team based around the independence of America and the original birthplace of the United States potentially playing around that point. We'll dive more into that as we keep going into this pod. So first, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's look at this first round matchup. The Sixers are going to be going up against the winner of the Wizards Pacers on Thursday night. Sorry about that. Against both of these teams, the Sixers just match up better in every position on the floor. The Pacers' best player, Sabonis, he's going to be matching up against Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is going to be able to not lock him down, but really stop his firepower. And it's going to force the Pacers to try and play through either TJ McCollum, former Sixer legend, and Doug McDermott. And I don't know about the rest of you guys, but that's just not too concerning for me. If the Sixers match up against the Pacers, that is a easy opponent for them. They did go 3-1 of them against this year. They did lose at the end of the season against them, but the Sixers were resting some of their starters. They had bench players out for a lot of that game. So when both sides were at full strength, the Sixers were 3-0 against them. You can't really knock that. Even if 3-1, you can't knock that. Now, the Sixers up against the Wizards, that is also going to be another good matchup. Sixers there match up better in every position, except for Bradley Beal going up against Steph Curry. Now, I don't think they're going to put Simmons on Beal in this situation, but they could. No matter what, someone's going to have to go up against either Beal or Russ, and it's going to be one of Danny Green or Steph Curry. And that's just a little concerning for me because you feel like one of them is going to be able to get their points. There have been times this year where they went up against the Wizards, and one of those two guys have really put up points against them. But the Sixers have come out on top in all the matchups this year. They're 3-0 against the Wizards. There's not too much really to talk about. You potentially have Miles Turner, who's going to be out for this series against the Pacers, who would be the biggest threat to Joel Embiid. You have Rui Hachimura for the Wizards, who can give him a little bit of pushback, or he matches up against Tobias. There's not too much more really to add with this matchup. It's my prediction for this series. It's going to be Sixers in 4. It's no contest. I could maybe see the Sixers in 5 if they go up against the Wizards. They're probably going to play the Wizards, but still, I see it as an easy 4-game sweep for Philly. There's not too much question about it. It's the 1 versus the 8. It is a super complete team, the best team in the Eastern Conference all year versus a team that just squeaked in to the 8th seed through the play-in. It should come as no surprise to see the Sixers are most likely going to go up into the second round. I would be floored if they didn't make it to the second round. But in the second round, they'll be going up against either the Knicks or the Hawks. Let's start looking off with the Atlantic opponent of the Knicks. They came in as the 4 seed this year with an absolute dominant year led by Julius Randle. All in all, this was a season that really came out of nowhere for the New York Knicks, and it's good to see the Knicks, perform at a high level, make the playoffs, and be competitive. It was fun to get to watch them throughout the year instead of them always being the laughingstock of, oh, they're just coming in bottom of the barrel. You don't really know what you're going to get from them. But Julius Randle really kept this team going, and this is a dominant defensive team. We can't discredit that. This is the third best defensive team in the NBA behind only the Sixers and the Lakers. But they don't have a lot of firepower on offense to really slow the Sixers down or really keep up with them. The defense could maybe give some pushback on the Sixers a little bit. You could see them maybe causing some cold shooting nights from guys like Danny Green or Steph Curry, or maybe slowing down Joel for one game. Nerlens Noel, another former Sixers legend, is going to be matched up against Embiid in that series. Julius Randle's going to match up against Tobias. Maybe they put Ben Simmons on him. Kind of interested to see what Doc Rivers comes out with some defensive sets for those series. Julius Randle is the one piece of the Knicks I am kind of concerned about, but I don't really see how they're going to stop Embiid or how they're going to be able to stop multiple scoring threats that the Sixers have. It's going to be a fun matchup to see the Sixers and the Knicks go up in the playoffs in the second round, if that's how it comes out. I don't really see them putting up too much of a threat to them. So let's move on. Let's see what the Atlanta Hawks have to give them. The Atlanta Hawks is the 5 seed this year. Another team performing above their expectations, led by Trae Young. This team has an excellent starting 5. And they also have Lou Williams as the dominant 6th man to really come out, offer some rotations, put up some bench scoring as well. I could see Clint Capella giving Joel Embiid some fits. You're probably going to see Ben Simmons at certain points down the stretch going up against Trae Young just to really stop that scoring option. Or maybe we see Matisse start a couple games to offer a better size matchup against Trae Young, really suffocate him out on the perimeter. John Collins, he's going to stretch the floor. He's going to go down low. He's going to go out wide. He will most likely go up against Tobias in that series. I see Tobias getting past John Collins, but I could see Tobias having some struggles defensively against him. Outside of Trae Young, this is a really tall lineup to go up against the Sixers. while they're not as strong defensively as the Knicks, size-wise, they still match up pretty well with them. However, the lack of bench depth is going to be imperative, and it's going to hurt the Hawks if they go up in this series against the Sixers. Bench depth is something that the Sixers have excelled at for a lot of the season. When they're fully healthy, they have one of the best benches in the NBA. You got a lot of guys that can really come off, offer some scoring options like Tyrese Maxey. You have two defensive greats, or former great, in Dwight Howard, who still goes out and controls the paint, and then one of the best up-and-coming defenders in the league in Matisse Thybulle, who potentially can get an all-defensive team vote, whether it's first team or second team. I really hope to see that. The starters of the Hawks and the Sixers can make this competitive, but when it comes to bench time, it feels like one of those series where you see the Sixers run away with it. Now, when it comes down to how I think that series will shake out, whether it's the Hawks or the Knicks, this really feels like a Sixers in 5 series. You could see the bench going cold one night against the Hawks and they give up a game, or you can see the defense shutting down a lot of offensive scorers when it's Knicks versus Sixers to steal a game there. The power is there for that. I feel more so the Hawks can steal a game from the Sixers than the Knicks, but Philly is too balanced, too deep, and too deadly of a rotation really to drop either one of those series. Now, for the Eastern Conference semis, I think it's most likely going to be Knicks versus Sixers. I think the Knicks match up a little better with the Hawks and can take that series far and get out of it. It's really going to be a toss-up to see who wins that series. I think FanDuel had the series odds for that at -110 for both, so they're really calling it even. It's a series you could see going 6 games, but we're going to have to see how the first matchups shake out on Sunday when these two play, and we're going to get a better feeling of who the Sixers could potentially go up against in the second round. No matter the case, I see Sixers in 5, and I don't know if many people are going to call it a cakewalk like I am, but this is really a cakewalk to the Eastern Conference Finals for the Sixers. Addressing on the Eastern Conference Finals, let's touch a little bit on who we're most likely to see there. Now, of the possible teams that can be there, the only one I don't see making it that far is the Celtics. I don't think the Celtics can get past the Nets, and if they somehow do get past Brooklyn, they don't make it past Milwaukee or Miami. They don't really have the height and the physicality there this year. They have the 2 mega offensive stars in Kemba and in Tatum. They just don't have the strength and the stamina really to make it through 2 rounds to get to this point. So that leaves us with the Heat, the Nets, and the Bucks as the most likely opponents to see going up against the Sixers here. I'm going to save a little more of some kind of previews and looking forward into it, because I'll talk about that as how I think the playoffs are going to shake out as a whole for the Sixers. But I think the Milwaukee Bucks would most likely give the Sixers the hardest series here. They feel like the most complete team in the East behind Philly. Obviously, Brooklyn has the star power there. They have Kyrie Irving. They have James Harden. They have Kevin Durant. They all seem like they're going to be coming back healthy. And after 2 series, they're really, if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, they're really going to have momentum. They're going to know how to play with each other. But the Sixers have had the Nets number this year. I've said it a couple times before in some previous pods. Anytime you see these super teams, they never really seem to get it done their first year. They're still trying to work out all the chemistry, and that's even more the case with this team this year. I believe they've only played 8 games together with all 3 of their star power players together. It's going to be really hard to make it that far in the playoffs, whether they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals or past the Eastern Conference Finals. I just don't think the potential is really there for them to take it that far. All of the betting sites have them as the finals favorites, most likely to make it out. I think that's going to change a little bit if we see if we see the Lakers clinch a playoff spot. I think they're most likely to take the odds-on favorite from Vegas of winning the title. But the Nets, I think it's really going to hurt them in the playoffs when they don't have some of their bench depth with guys like Jared Allen, who they traded away to get some of these pieces. They don't have as much of a threat of a big man in DeAndre Jordan. Yes, he was good so many years ago. He's someone who can put up some numbers offensively. I don't see him giving much of a problem, though, to Joel Embiid defensively. I think Embiid can really get around him, bully him around in the paint. Maybe DeAndre puts up some points here and there. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. The Miami Heat also could offer some fits in the Eastern Conference Finals. Do you feel like this is another complete team to come out in the East? Of course, they made the NBA Finals last year. A good amount of that team is still together, primarily Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Two big scoring options, and Bam can give a lot of good looks defensively, where he could slow Embiid down a little bit. I'd be interested to see these two go up. I think the Sixers still have more bench depth, and they can really outlast the Heat if they were to go in a series here. I still think the Bucks, touched on it before, this is going to be the hardest team to get past in the Eastern Conference Finals, especially with the addition of Jrue Holiday this year. It's going to be Giannis versus Embiid. Giannis is a little more mobile offensively, but Joel has a lot more options to kick it out to. You can see Giannis potentially spaced out more on the floor, and it could create some looks for Embiid down low. It's just the way these two teams match up. It's going to be very interesting and also exciting if we get this matchup to see how they do. I won't talk about the Eastern Conference Finals yet of who I think the Sixers will play and how I think it'll go. I'll look down at it in a few minutes. But first, I just want to touch on the NBA Finals and primarily who I see coming out of the western side of the table. The odds-on favorites from Vegas in order to make the finals out of the West are the Los Angeles Lakers, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the Utah Jazz. Not too much of a surprise there outside of the Lakers, who are currently in the play-in game that is playing tonight as of recording. They're not even guaranteed a spot in the playoffs, and yet they're still the favorites. Like I mentioned briefly when talking about Brooklyn, I think they are probably going to move up to much higher odds once they make it out of the play-in tournament. If they make it out of the play-in tournament, we'll have to see how they do against the Warriors. But I just don't see them losing to the Grizzlies or the Spurs in the second play-in game there. Of those three teams, who I think is coming out of the West? Honestly, I think it's most likely going to be the Clippers. This is a team that has a lot of offensive power, a lot of defensive help as well. The chemistry's there this season. It's the second year that they are all together. It can take them far. They have really good seeding in the 4-5 matchup to play the winner of the 1-8, which will be Utah versus either the Lakers, Warriors, or Jazz, depending on how that really shakes out. So you could see a lot of cannibalization early here. I don't see too much of a threat from the 2-7 and 3-6 matchups out there. I would like to see the Suns make it out of the West, but the West kind of feels like a crapshoot. Like it really is the Wild Wild West. Who's going to make it out of there? I feel that the Clippers have a lot of power and a lot of cohesive energy to really make it out. Yes, they're the 4 seed, but seeding really doesn't matter in the West this year with how much talent there is, because you have a team like the Suns and the Jazz who are 2-1 respectively, but they don't really have a lot of that playoff experience with them outside of Chris Paul down in Phoenix. So the West is going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out. Like I said, probably going to be the Clippers, might go Jazz. Probably going to get a better feel on it after these first couple games in the first round to see how these teams really come out and play right out the bat. But I'm calling Clippers in the NBA Finals this year coming out of the West. Before going into how I think the Sixers are going to play out in the playoffs as a whole, let's talk about X Factor in the playoffs. This is going to be the guy who's going to come out and be the biggest make or break difference for the Sixers as to their imperative success or failure. Now, obvious answers, you can always say Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, but I want to look at two names who I think are going to play much more of a role and players that I really feel like they can go one or the other way in the playoffs this year. First things first, let's talk about Steph Curry. His three-point shooting really needs to be consistent in the playoffs for the Sixers to go far. There have been too many nights where he's come out, been cold, and just not really put up any points for them. Going cold is really going to kill the entire offensive threat of this team because you have a night 0-5, 0-6 from the field going into halftime. Teams are going to make adjustments. They're going to put a lot more pressure on Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid and really force the ball to them, and they're able to leave Seth open knowing he's probably not going to make more shots if he just doesn't have a stroke tonight. He doesn't need to shoot the lights out every night. He doesn't need to go out, put up 20 points, go 5 or 5 from the field, 6 or 6 from the field every night beyond the arc. He can have like 3 or 6 points in a matchup. But what we really can't have from Steph Curry here is him going out and going 0 of 8, 0 or 9 from beyond the arc, or like 1 of 10 from the field as a whole. Because if he's taking shots and he's not making them, he needs to know that he needs to pass it up. But he needs to be able to find out early before he takes too many and kill some offensive threats where we're not going to get offensive rebounds, or give defenses time to adjust and kind of leave him open, give him some slack, and be able to double guys like Ben Tobias or Joel, depending on how things are really shaping out for them. He's someone who he goes so hot and so cold rapidly, really goes in those heat waves. He is going to be so imperative to this run, and I can really see him making a difference of the Sixers making the NBA Finals or slipping and then going down or crashing to a halt in the Eastern Conference Finals. Another player I want to touch on that I feel like a lot more people are going to talk about as well is Matisse Thybulle. We were talking about him a lot, or fans as a whole were talking about him a lot in last year's playoffs, in the bubbles, not just because of the vlogs he was making, but because of the defensive options that he offered. A lot of fans wanted to see Brett Brown put him on the field or put him on the court, see how he could stop some players, and he did get an NBA start last year against the Celtics, but he just was not up to it. He had the defensive potential there, but he just didn't have enough experience to really go out and go up against the murderers that the Boston Celtics were last year. He's been excellent this season defensively, really flipping his switch and stepping up into a player who has a chance to be all defense NBA for the next 5 or 6 years. He was someone who I remember we touched on, does he get traded at the deadline this year for some more pieces? And thank God management did not listen to fans about that one, because I was kind of iffy, like, oh, I feel okay trading Thybulle if we're able to get another piece to win right now. But Matisse really feels like a piece that can help us win right now. Defensively, he's going to have to come up off the bench, maybe even start some games in some of those later series like the Eastern Conference Finals to go up against someone like a Kyrie Irving, a James Harden, a Jrue Holiday, a Jimmy Butler, potentially put him on there and really shut him down. He sees a lot of these plays before they develop on defense, which is rare for a lot of these guys. He has a chance to really shut some teams down, kill some hot streaks, really get some players' heads and make them try and change their games. I think he has the chance to be the best positive X factor for these playoffs, but Steph Curry has the best chance to be a negative X factor. We finally got to the point. Let's go into it, how I think the playoffs are going to shape out as a whole for the Sixers. I mentioned it already. The Sixers are going to play either the Wizards or the Pacers, most likely the Wizards in that first round, and I think that's just an easy sweep in 4 games. Maybe 5 games, depending on how Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook do, who matches up against them defensively. Maybe one of them has a night where they shoot the lights out and you're never going to be able to stop them. But still, pretty easily, Sixers in 4, maybe Sixers in 5 there. Second round, going up against either the Knicks or the Hawks. I think it's going to be the Knicks. And in that series, whether it's the Knicks or the Hawks, that's a Sixers in 5 matchup right there. Both of those teams have the threat to steal a game from Philly, but they don't have the durability and the depth and just multiple scoring options to really go up against Philly and cause havoc to break down that defense. It's going to be an easy series, and I see the Sixers just walking into the Eastern Conference Finals. A lot of people have said it. I hate saying it because it makes me feel like I'm going to jinx them. I'm just going to see it, or I'm going to say it as I see it. Sixers in the Eastern Conference Finals pretty handedly. Now, when we get to the Eastern Conference Finals, I feel that it is going to be the Bucks there. I don't think the Nets are going to make it that far, and I think it's going to be a tough series in the first round. But if they can outlast the Heat, I see them pretty easily making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, when it comes to the Eastern Conference Finals, this is going to be a series that goes long. I think the Sixers win it in 6, but it's going to feel like every game is coming close down to the wire. And by the end of game 6, it's like, oh my God, every game has felt like a game 7. Giannis, he's going to cause problems for this team. Jrue Holiday, he's able to pass the ball around very well, has a lot of vision, able to score at a higher level than someone like Eric Bledsoe could. I still think it really comes down to the Sixers bench here. Normally, in past years, I'd say the Sixers bench is where it really hurt them and caused them to kind of collapse in these playoff series. This is the year where I really feel that they have the chance to take it to that next level, really go up higher, and just beat teams that years before they couldn't. Everything really feels like it's gelling together here to make this NBA Finals run. Being the 1 seed helps a lot. They get a floor for themselves, get some momentum going into these series, and it's really going to help whether they face the Nets, the Bucks, or the Heat. If the Sixers play the Nets, I think that's an easier series than if they play the Bucks. Now, it's going to be kind of weird to say because the Nets are this super team. They have 3 multiple-year All-Stars, and you kind of wonder, how are these guys going to slow down Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden? All 3 of them on the court, one of them naturally isn't going to get that many touches, or if they're feeling cold, you're able to make reads on the fly. Ben Simmons against Kevin Durant is going to be a really, really tough matchup for them. I think Kevin Durant can get the better of them in some of those games. I think if they play the Nets, though, it's another one where the Sixers win in 6. Kevin Durant, he's the big bad boogeyman. There's no other way to put it. James Harden offers a lot of offensive scoring power, but he is coming off that injury. They have been resting him a little more to get ready to go into the playoffs. I don't think he's going to have it with him. I don't think this team has enough cohesive energy and chemistry to get past the Sixers in this series. If they do, then I could see him winning it all this year. I think whoever comes out of the East wins the NBA Finals this year. No matter who the opponent is on the West, I think the Lakers will cause a little bit of chaos and havoc here and there. Looking at the Heat potentially playing them in the Eastern Conference Finals, that's another relatively easy series for the Sixers. Sixers have 3 big guys and bench depth that just really outmuscle and can shut down a lot of scoring options that Miami has to offer. This is a different Miami team than the team that made the finals last year. You had the incredible run of Tyler Herro last year, not playing as well this year. It's really going to come down to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo for the 2 of them, but I think the Sixers are able to outlast them there. Now, moving on to the NBA Finals. As you've heard, like I've been saying, I have the Sixers here in the finals. I have them going up against the Clippers. I don't think the Lakers have it together this year. They seem like the team where they're the easy pick to put in the finals, but with all the injuries, something just feels wrong with them. They don't have a lot of just charisma together this year, and I know I'm saying that about a team that won the NBA Finals last year, but the Sixers took 2 important bench players for him last year, and even a starter in Danny Green and Dwight Howard. And I think having that bench depth for the Lakers last year was what got them to the finals. And without that this year, and a little banged up Bron and AD, who hasn't had a lot of streaks of healthy play, it's really lining up for the Clippers to take the West here. Now, coming up between the Sixers and the Clippers, it is going to be a tough series. Kawhi Leonard going up against Ben Simmons. You're going to have Joel Embiid going up against, I think, Zubac down in the paint. I think he's the backup center. I don't know who the starting center is this year. It might be Zubac, but I'm not positive on that. You have Paul George, who's going to go up against probably Tobias Harris. Just how everything's shaping out there, it's going to be a really even matchup, but I see the Sixers coming out on top in 6 games in the NBA Finals. Everything is really gelling together for this team right now. It seems like it's too good to be true, but there are some roadblocks in their way. A lot of people are writing off the Sixers early because, it's going to be the Nets, the Lakers. You're going to look at where the star players are in the league. But the Sixers, they have a lot of defensive threat on their side. They have good scorers off the bench. They're able to generate a lot of offense when they're fully healthy, which they are right now. It's a dangerous, dangerous team to be messing with. I've been preaching this since the inception of the podcast. The Nets don't have the cohesiveness to win this year. The Sixers are going to go up. They're going to go in the NBA Finals, and we're going to have a parade down Broad Street come the middle of July. And I will be on there. You can book that right now. I will make sure I'm front row and center at some portion of that parade, whether it's a socially distanced parade, a masked parade, a non-masked parade. Who knows what the summer is going to look like. I think it's a very, very good look to see some hard work coming back home to the city of Philadelphia this year. I'm so giddy and excited. I've been waiting for this pod for 2 weeks because this is how I've kind of seen the bracket really shaping out for the Sixers. It's a really favorable draw for them, and everything just seems right for them to take home the title this year. Not too many people are speaking of it right now. They're talking about them as threats, but I feel like there's enough buzz around them, but not too much hype, where the Sixers know that they're being counted out by a lot of people across the league, and it's just going to make them step up harder and play better. They've had the last two playoff experiences that have not gone well. It went horrible in the bubble with some injuries. They got embarrassed by the Celtics. The Kawhi shot from 2 years ago really haunts and hangs over the Sixers, but this really feels like the year that the Sixers win it all. And if they don't win it all, they still make the NBA Finals, and they have a lot of these pieces together to run it back next year and maybe take it then. But everything feels right now for Philly to take home the title. I'm probably repeating myself a lot, saying it over and over and over, but I really believe this, and I can really see it happening, and I'm so excited to watch these playoffs shake out. Even if the Sixers don't make it, it feels like a really good balance of teams this year, where you have a lot of young teams with real threats to make it places, a lot of teams that can shake it up, teams that normally don't make it super far, like the Jazz and the Suns, who can really give some teams a run for their money and make it to the finals. Maybe we see a finals without LeBron James this year for the first time in however many years it seems like. No, 2 years ago was the last time we saw the finals without LeBron. But getting used to an NBA reality where we're seeing LeBron James less often in the finals than more often after the run he's had throughout the 2010s. I think that's it. That's all I have to talk about for the playoffs right now. We're going to be talking so much more about it as it shapes up, especially when we find out who the Sixers are playing in the first round. We get to see some of those games going forward. This is a very, very exciting time for Philadelphia sports, and especially Philadelphia basketball. NBA playoffs as a whole start on, I believe, Friday. We get some of the first round games in the Eastern Conference while we're waiting for the Western Conference play-in game to finish up that Friday night between the loser of the 7-8 game and the winner of the 9-10 game as well. All in all, it'll be exciting. We'll have to see how it all shapes out. It looks very good for the NBA this year rating-wise, and even better for the Sixers going forward. So just wrapping up really quickly, I want to look at bets of the week. Not to toot my own horn, I am positive on the year. It feels good to finally back in the positive net rating. I'm up 265 on the year, while I am 6-8 in total on picks. And what I'm looking at for this week, I'm looking at the Eastern Conference play-in game for who's going to go up against the Sixers. Now, instead of taking money line or spread, there's one that I really like here. Russell Westbrook over 30 points against the Pacers at plus 194. This just feels like a game that Russ is going to go off. You could tell he was disturbed, he was agitated, he was pissed off, rightfully so, after getting embarrassed by the Celtics in the second half. They let Jason Tatum go off and put on a clinic. That game was over for the last 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. I don't see Russ letting that happen again. There's going to be a lot more focus put on Bradley Beal, but this feels like a Russ night where he puts up over 30 points and has that triple-double threat going forward. So Russell Westbrook over 30 at plus 194. That's what I got going. We'll revisit that going forward for next week. And that's all we got for this podcast today. I'm excited that everyone got a chance to tune in. A lot of love we began recently. Keep sharing it with all your friends, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, just anywhere you get your podcast. Depending on how some things shape up, I think this podcast is actually on YouTube tonight to try and expand our audience a little more. So if this is your first time listening over there, welcome. Hope you really like the show. This is, all in all, a very exciting project that Steve and I have been working on moving forward. Wish Steve could have joined me here today, but we'll be back ready to go for you guys coming in on Monday. So these are the views from Lock K. I'm Max. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Very excited to see how the Sixers shape up. Clap your hands, everybody. It's the Philadelphia 76ers. Catch you guys on Monday.